Thank you everybody for coming to this webinar. This is our fourth webinar in this first year of Network's existence. So it's really nice to kind of complete this year. We've had very different topics in each of the webinars, representing different interests and areas where coaching has had an influence across higher education. I'm always grateful to colleagues who are willing to share and to present their work so we can all learn and continue and develop this practice. So thank you to today's presenter as well. So today's session is Beyond Compliance, How Can We Reclaim Coaching in Degree Apprenticeships Progress Reviews by Laura Hogben. So Laura is doing her doctoral research in this area. So she's here to share her experience and lived experience of practitioners who conduct degree apprenticeships and discuss some of the challenges that are facing those colleagues in this role, as well as how coaching can support more effective delivery of progress reviews. Laura is a work-based tutor with the Degree Apprenticeships team at the University of Portsmouth and is undertaking a professional doctorate in education. Laura has extensive and successful experience in the apprenticeship sector. Her contribution to professional practice has been recognized through her involvement in a government-funded project exploring the experience of apprentice students who have or are at risk of withdrawing. An invitation to present her doctoral work at University Vocational Awards Council events. Laura's doctoral research explores effective degree apprenticeships progress reviews, the tripartite relationship, and the professional identities of degree apprenticeships progress reviewers. She's passionate about the value this role brings to apprenticeships while recognizing the philosophical limbo concerning compliance and accountability reviewers experience within their job roles. I'm sure that everyone will agree with that one today, whoever joined us in the room. I don't want to hold this much further. Thank you so much for attending today. I assume that most of you are members of the network, but if you're not, if you found this link elsewhere, I will be posting a joining form in a chat in case you want to continue being a member of the network and hear about future events and meetings. And I will hand over to Laura now, who will be speaking for around 45 minutes. If you have any questions for Laura and you want to type them as we go, you can use Q&A section or a chat, whatever is easier for you. And we will have 15-20 minutes for questions after the presentation, followed by some Padlet activity where you will have opportunity to share your thoughts as well. So over to Laura. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, and also thank you for your support in setting this up as well. Okay, hopefully the tech will play. Okay, has the slide moved on for everybody? Wonderful. Yeah. So good afternoon. Obviously, I'm Laura, and I wanted to begin by thanking you for taking time out of your busy days and the busy end of term and year to participate in the webinar Beyond Compliance, Reclaiming Coaching and Degree Apprenticeship Progress Reviews. As a professional doctorate candidate, my thesis is linked directly to my current role in the sector I work in. I consider myself as an insider in terms of my research, having worked in the apprenticeship space for over 20 years. I've taught, assessed and course-led on apprenticeships. I've completed a qualification linked to conducting endpoint assessments. I've held roles as senior leading positions within organisations managing large apprenticeship provisions. I've employed apprentices, but I feel especially privileged to have studied at this level and completed my own level 7 apprenticeship just in time in terms of funding. I enjoyed my apprenticeship so much that I decided to take on a role, this role within a university. I enjoyed the apprenticeship and I enjoyed the level as well. And this has given me the time and space, kind of, to continue my education journey and in particular my doctoral studies, an area that I'm very passionate about. So reviewing progress. So progress reviews are a key component of apprenticeship delivery and are conducted by a, oh, has that moved on? Apologies. Oh, apologies. Here we go. Progress reviews are a key component of apprenticeship delivery and are conducted by a range of colleagues within the sector. However, it's a role that is interpreted differently by different professionals and training providers. And this endeavour is exacerbated by the number of apprenticeship standards and the many industries they are from. As of July 2025, there are 153 level 6 and level 7 apprenticeships standards that are ready and approved for delivery. Many colleagues who conduct reviews face challenges balancing the compliance requirements, for example, Ofsted and ESFA, with the tutoring and coaching aspects of the role. This philosophical limbo is often intensified by high caseloads. This research project aims to unpick this further by exploring the lived experiences and the deluge of pressure and job creep experienced by many, with the overall aim to identify how the professional identity formation of these colleagues can be supported further and provide clarity concerning good practice of the role. As a researcher, I'm really mindful of my positionality, and I've seen and experienced firsthand the challenges associated with this position, and believe this research in its totality will support the development of this important role, one that Laczik et al. 2025 classifies as the linchpin. Various research has been conducted since the inception of degree apprentices in 2015. For example, policy by Smith et al. 2024, off-the-job training, Cook et al. 2024, course design, resources, Rowe et al. 2016, and apprentice identity by Brindley et al. 2024, to list just a few. However, I'm not aware of research that looks at the nuances of this role and the key stakeholders associated with it. This study has started that journey. So my approach. So the approach for this research project was to conduct semi-structured interviews with a small sample and analyse using IPA to explore the perspectives and lived experiences of colleagues involved with degree apprenticeship progress reviews. IPA was chosen as it's underpinned by hermeneutics and ideographic experiences and is supportive of the internal positioning of the researcher, me, to interpret and make sense of these experiences. And although a timely endeavour, as discussed by Farouk 2018, and involved many hermeneutic cycles, it provided rigour due to prolonged engagement. What was clear was the genuine interest in the topic. The small convenience sample quickly grew through word of mouth with lots of interest, providing lots of rich data. I had lots of emails from people that heard about the study. Could they participate? This did mean that using IPA was a challenge, as it does warrant a smaller sample size. I will definitely be returning to the data at a later point. There are so many more stories to tell that I think are important to be heard. It has gone well so far, with 4 invitations to present my research and a request to submit my findings as a journal paper, which is both nice and quite a nerve-wracking position to be in. From the IPA analysis, 3 group experiential themes emerged: value congruence of the role, philosophical limbo, and professional identity. So we'll have a little look through those now. So value congruence of the role. The value of the role was illustrated through discussions and experiences linked to caseloads, time, and others' perspectives involved in the apprenticeships. This could be interpreted as value congruence, where the value of the role held by employer and employee and others aligned. Sadly, this wasn't common among many participants. Caseloads were an interesting discussion point, and it was noteworthy that some HEI leaders have reduced the average number of caseloads, indicating value placed on the role in comparison to some institutions where caseloads are still high. For example, when I started, we were allocated 100 students. Full-time, it's ridiculous. Now it's down to 50. This research showed the associated stresses this puts on colleagues. One participant identified that this September they would have around 125 apprentices to review. And as Doran shared, this amount results in working late into the evening. This is the same participant who discussed the challenges with line managers' non-attendance and whether or not to rebook and be outside of the compliance window due to high caseloads. It's no surprise that colleagues with higher caseload experienced more challenges as they dealt with increased paperwork and administration. a product of managerial reforms and a perspective shared by Barnett 2008. However, for some, numbers were even higher, and the negative impact and potential influence on well-being from working excessive hours was clear. Perspectives shared by Mullins and Lawrenson 2024 and the participants of this study. For example, it's hectic. You can't really do much more than your reviews, and you're working to 11, 12 o'clock at night. The you can't really do much more than reviews refers to coaching and mentoring aspects of the role. Time was a common personal experiential theme and was heavily discussed. The two quotes, and there were many to choose from, show the link between time and the value placed on the role. For example, I think they, progress reviewers, are one of the most undervalued colleagues in the cycle. Everyone needs to value the role. I literally started this job and completed my first progress review 2 hours later. For me, conducting a review 2 hours after starting in post is a situation that I would find very uncomfortable. The comments from Amina, I'm picking up new standards, and if you're not given time to understand it, it can be much more challenging, and be in control of the conversation, are significant. And through IPA, aligned to relational identity, as discussed by Chandran et al. 2019 as part of their community of practice model. Anderson and Chen's 2020 article also covers relational identity, which emerges from interpersonal experiences and shared ideology with significant others. It's important that conversations are relevant, valued, and as Amina put it, in control. I have experienced the challenges of being given new standards and trying to unpick the assessment plan, the KSBs, and hold conversations that are meaningful to all involved. Another area of interest was the value other colleagues, so non-reviewers, placed on both the role and those conducting reviews. And it was disappointing to hear that how one participant felt their professional knowledge wasn't utilised. As they said, we had a colleague in one faculty where they were really keen to keep us out of the classroom. What an absolute waste. This was a colleague with considerable sector knowledge and experiences, as well as apprenticeship expertise. Phenomena like this is not conducive to professional identity formation and relational identity, which develops with these really important interpersonal experiences and shared ideology with others. I had hoped that this was just an anomaly and something that only I had experienced, but sadly it wasn't. Through reflexivity, I'm now going to add a course lead, module lead sample to the next phase of my research. I believe this will support an awareness of the role and what colleagues conducting reviews do, and importantly, what they can bring to the table. Lots of participants shared experiences where their apprentices and line managers were incredibly grateful for their support, and with comments like, I wouldn't have finished without you, and I'm graduating because of you. What was interesting were the participants who shared positive experiences and feedback from their apprentices. For example, Nadeem typically had lower numbers and time for a more coaching approach. And I think that's quite an interesting analysis. So in terms of value congruence, it's clear that caseloads and high numbers impact the ability to have coaching conversations and dialogue within progress review meetings. Sadly, not all apprentices and their line managers found value in the progress review meetings, and I wonder what the impact would be if a coaching approach is introduced right at the beginning as part of the IAG and induction. I don't think I'm suggesting a full-on coaching contract, but it would be definitely interesting to hear approaches and perspectives on this in the latter half of this webinar from the experts in coaching that we have on this call. Time and training without doubt would be beneficial for degree apprentice reviewers to ensure meaningful dialogues around progress and the KSBs could take place. I know when we introduced Space Engineer, I was a bit wary of whether they were going to ask me to do that one, because that's an area I don't have much experience in, and was a little bit panicked about the work that would need to be done in a short time frame to be able to have some meaningful conversations. But my colleagues picked that up and actually is really enjoying it as an apprenticeship standard. And I think my final thought on this group experiential theme is, what impact or change in direction would the word coach have in degree apprenticeship reviewers' titles? Could it be the start in the right direction? So philosophical limbo. So interpretation of the lived experiences of practitioners identified a strong group experiential theme of this philosophical limbo concerning the performative and administrative nature of the role, perspectives shared by Ball 2000, and the ethical dilemma, a viewpoint discussed by Shaw and Wright 2000. A significant time during all of the interviews involved hearing about colleagues' experiences and perspectives on the juxtaposition between the compliance aspects and coaching and tutoring. Not surprisingly, this was felt more by colleagues with higher caseloads, but was a hot topic across the board. Performativity, discussed by Ball in 2003 and 2006, was covered as many participants referred to tick boxes relating to systems, chasing signatures, audits, review windows, compliance windows, to list just a few. And as Sakura said, chasing down comments and signatures. So that for me is the things we have to keep an eye on. And Gabby summarised by saying, it's a tick box nation and reviews are quite mechanical. Challenges with non-attendance of line managers and whether or not to rebook outside of the compliance window due to high caseloads was discussed. That philosophical limbo was observed here as rhetorical questions were used, which Solovey in 2014 discussed are used to respond to inquiries when there might not be an easy answer or there's some uncomfortableness around answering questions. And Amina's quote is, it's always more difficult if employer doesn't attend, you know? That can be one of the barriers. And actually, do we then not do it and become not compliant and reschedule? This is something I've experienced, and I find I often reschedule during the time I've allocated for a break to ensure I'm compliant. This way I meet apprentices and employers' diaries, but often to the detriment of my own well-being. A real challenge. Experience, perspectives and impact of regulations were shared, often using negative connotations. Big, shock, huge, dictator, the bogeyman were all interesting words used and was interpreted as how participants made sense of their emotions, in line with a paper by Sapute and Linguist 2021. The pressure of ESFA in particular, so the Education Skills Funding Agency, and the daily impact of these funding rules were expressed by many participants. And I felt Louise's comments showed the challenge many degree apprentice reviewers experience. And she said, the feeling is definitely that the role has become much more around compliance, and we've got to really watch our backs, followed by, so you know, the great thing is talking with apprentices, supporting them, and you know, everybody says try not to lose sight of that. And I think it shows the limbo reviewers often experience, and the wording of we've really got to watch our backs was telling. Interestingly, one participant felt there wasn't a real impact of regulations, but then proceeded to express that they'd created their own tick lists and were actually self-regulating. And this could be interpreted as subconscious performativity resulting from previous practices that they'd had with many years working in FE, a sector recognised for its governmental regulation, a common rhetoric by Keep 2015. Colleagues, however, did talk about the importance of compliance and accountability and ensuring government funds were spent properly, and that apprentices and employers were committed to what they'd signed up for. Compliance and accountability were also discussed in terms of the importance of quality and the development of teaching. Employers are releasing their apprentices to attend sessions, and these should be of excellent quality, relevant, and motivational. One participant discussed positively how they'd utilised some of these compliance aspects for non-apprenticeship programmes and how effective this had been. Although they used different terminology, the premise was the same. So off the job was being recorded, it just wasn't being recorded as off the job. Many institutions have utilised systems now to support compliance. However, the general consensus from the participants was this had added administrative burden and could explain why a more performative approach has been adopted. Bailey discussed their perspectives, identifying this was an uncomfortable position to be in, and they said there's a tension between coaching and what we actually need to fit in. One such system has now included an AI component, and I heard someone recently say, and I quote, "The system is doing the job for us and we need to be careful, we'll be out of a job," which was concerning to hear. Although if it could chase correctly outstanding signatures, that would be helpful. Summarising this group experiential theme, many participants felt they overly focused on the performative compliance aspect of the role, which ultimately reduces the time and preparation for really important coaching conversations. The impact of regulations was clear, but I think what was quite concerning and outlined in the question in green on the slide, and also quite personal for me, is the impact of the introduction of performance systems as part of this review. And part of my reflective and reflexive journey, I've really considered this. I do worry about my approach. It has changed. I am following boxes on a form. I'm worried if I've got 4 or 5 reviews a day, if I don't do that, I won't get on top of them and be able to get those finished. I am worrying about outstanding signatures. And this was one of the main reasons for joining this network and agreeing to present, so that I could hear ideas and perspectives from others in coaching roles to look at how we could mitigate the impact that this is having and bring coaching back to the kind of main purpose of the reviews. So professional identity, I have to be completely honest, this group experiential theme is one. However, it links to everything that I've said. It's embedded, interdependent and woven through all of the findings that I had. But here it is, it's one by itself. Otherwise, it would have just been a massive set of one big theme. So job roles and professional identity are closely aligned and interdependent, as discussed by Grant et al. 2014 and Neary 2014. For strong identities, colleagues need to feel they belong and have a title that is reflective of their duties, and as Barpanda and Dweveli 2022 discussed, not ambiguous. Unsurprisingly, there were 10 different job titles held by the 17 participants, all conducting the same role. And I imagine many of the people on the call today who conduct reviews may even have different ones or have heard of different ones. And I'd seen as people were introducing them in the chat that I was like, oh, that's an interesting one. I've not heard that one yet. So a lot of titles. And that could be interpreted as to why there's a lack of clarity and misunderstanding of what the role entails. And that's a perspective discussed by Lynch 2017. It can also indicate the different interpretations HEIs have made of the role. The language used by participants when describing job roles and titles, including "we've got them all" from Stephen, and "that's the one we've given it" from Bailey, illustrates that colleagues do not feel a strong affiliation with their job title. The varied titles also open the door to a deluge of job creep and job crafting. So job creep and illegitimate tasks weren't too much of a surprise, as this is not uncommon for roles positioned within the third space, as discussed by Whitchurch 2008 and shared by Amina, who discussed how they'd carried out non-role tasks. And they'd said, "I'm not precious, but I have module coordinators emailing me to do administrative tasks." What was surprising was the job crafting that was observed, for example, by Nadim and Kasha. And this could be interpreted as intrinsic motivation, where Nadim wanted to improve their own development of the apprenticeship standard, creating meaningful work as covered by Pratt and Ashford 2003, and by Kasha, who added proofreading to feel valued by others and seek value in their role, a perspective shared by Yang et al. 2022. On further exploration, this crafting was in line with previous positions held. Could this be because if we are unsure, we revert back to what we are sure and confident of? In the case of reviewing assignments and references, this was the case, but this could also be due to professional identity formation and our own perceptions and how we are perceived by others. And that kind of shared ideology, as discussed by Tyler and Bladder 2003, and also that straddling more than one identity, a viewpoint from Peel 2005. I have often found myself referring to research methodology, ontology and epistemology when talking to apprentices who are completing their final dissertation or final work product, because it's a topic I love chatting about, but I would say a very tenuous link to the KSBs for sure. And there are other examples that I then realised where I was job crafting, and I'm like, actually, that's not part of this role. A mixed consensus was observed concerning whether reviewers should have competencies for the standards they supported apprentices on. Unsurprisingly, participants without competencies expressed a perspective that subject-specific knowledge was not important. What was noteworthy was Doran's unique perspective on professional knowledge and lived experience, and that having this was actually a disadvantage due to over-familiarity, and they ended up picking up the role of the workplace mentor, line manager, and the degree apprentice reviewer. Profiling the role was a tricky question for many. There is no real cohesion around the role. Within our department, if you ask the question, you would get completely different answers. And I changed my mind every week, indicating the unease experienced around the role as practitioners try to make sense of it. And it was clearly something that was thought of often. The topic of coaching and similar skills, however, was consistently discussed as part of this question. Coaching and mentoring job titles did not automatically mean coaching took place or was valued. As Gabby shared, being drawn in initially with this beautiful kind of job experience, like you're there to act as a coach and a mentor, and then the reality is something different. Job titles associated with the role were not always valued by those conducting the role, and it was unclear what the role should look like and entail. Apart from coaching, that was really clear. And I keep coming back to the word coach in the title, but I know there is so much more to this than just the title and just the word. So the purpose of this study was to explore the lived experience of practitioners conducting degree apprentice progress reviews, and it's evident that work is required to support colleagues with professional identity formation, and there are merits of using a community of practice model to incorporate individual, relational, and collective identities, all relevant to the role of a reviewer. And this would also increase the value and awareness of others involved in apprenticeships. So apologies, there's lots of bits going on this slide, but it was the best way to try and show the complex relationship that degree apprentice reviewers have. So Chandran et al.'s 2019 Community of Practice model focuses on professional identity, and they discuss how the development of professional identity occurs through dynamic, individual, relational and collective identities within this community of practice. And the three key identities work well and are aligned well with the role of degree apprenticeship progress reviewers. The individual identity recognises the excellent practitioner's experiences, agency, sense of self, values, drive and motivation they bring to the role. The relational identity in the context of degree apprenticeship reviewers is very important. It almost warrants its own Venn diagram to show the many intersects and many relationships colleagues reviewing progress have to navigate, from the apprentice to the apprentice's line manager, mentor, faculty staff, professional service staff, and their own line managers, to list a few. Work on relational identity can only develop and increase and support the value congruence of the role, which will ultimately support that collective identity. It's important that all involved with degree apprenticeships, and reviewers in particular, which Laczik et al. 2025 calls the linchpin, they need to feel a sense of belonging, unity, shared values and professionalism. A job title is required that reviewers can feel proud of, one that can support motivation and job satisfaction and professional identity formation. It's recognised that identities shift and change, but colleagues need an anchoring point, and a title that is recognised sector-wide, I think, will support the professionalism of the role. When I'm asked what I do, I often avoid giving my job title. It isn't reflective of my role and just adds confusion to the conversation. While this was only a small-scale study, it did include participants from 8 universities, which enabled an interpretation that many institutions and colleagues do lack that value congruence of the role, and provided further justification that this project in its totality, which will consider other key stakeholders' perspectives, will be beneficial. Further research to support congruence is crucial, and I think should concern caseloads. A clear benchmark or sector expectation would be useful for both leaders and colleagues to reduce the negative impact of high numbers and achieve value congruence and ultimately job satisfaction. This will also allow for the important prioritisation of coaching and the important aspects of that as identified by literature and the participants. While numbers are high, performative and accountability tasks will continue to take over. Secondly, this work should focus on the professional competencies of reviewers or training linked to KSBs, and what is the minimum required to complete reviews to support that relational identity. This may be more relevant and timely now in light of the recent announcements where the DfE have decided to allow parts of an apprenticeship assessment to be conducted by training providers themselves in the future, another potential aspect to a role which is already multifaceted. What was incredibly evident from conducting the research and the interpretation of data was the importance of a coaching approach and ensuring that this isn't at risk due to the use of performance management systems. Compliance and accountability is always going to be a key factor. Apprenticeships are, after all, government funded, but it's important that apprenticeships receive good quality training. We just need to work out a coaching approach that considers this with minimal impact to ensure the apprentices is at the forefront of the apprenticeship. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, Clementina.
Hi there, Laura.
Hi, Clementina.
Hi, it's Clemmy here from the OU. I just wondered, in your participants, were they, because you mentioned third space, so in terms of the type of contracts your participants were on, were they all what we would call third space, or were some of them on academic contracts?
So yeah, so interesting. Some were a combination of that. So we had apprentices on reviewers, sorry, on academic contracts that actually didn't sit within a faculty. So they were on an academic contract, but definitely third space. The majority, which was probably a fairly even split between those that sat directly in faculty and those that were classed as professional service, so within that third space. So there was a real mix match. But I'm on an academic contract, but I sit centrally.
Okay, that's brilliant. So that's good, because that means that the results will be applicable across all the differences across the sector. That's good. Yeah. And how do you think, so when we write for our practice tutors and kind of learning development, I've always taken this approach that if they can get the coaching approach element right, then that might make the compliance bit easier, and that's kind of a hopeful. So I'm just wondering, as you know, as a practitioner in that space, what you think about how you might use coaching approaches as someone that's worked in that space, is actually doing that aspect of the work, how you personally feel coaching would benefit your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a coaching qualification, and I often reflect on my practice, and I'm cross with myself that actually I've kind of gone down this tick box moment and stuff. If I have more than 3 reviews, I really struggle in that time frame, because trying to type stuff up afterwards is really kind of tricky and capture that. What I've started doing where possible is adding in, like the blob tree, for example. I've always loved the blob tree, but adding in kind of extra bits. So instead of like the well-being question that we have, I won't ask the well-being question, but I'll share the blob tree and we'll do it round that. If I've got an apprentice that's up to date with their off the job, which is yay, I won't ask about off the job, but I'll find something from their log and ask them to tell me about that. But all of those things take a lot of time and preparation. And if my numbers are high, or my day's busy, or my week's busy, which has often been the case if I've taken annual leave, for example, I can tell when I've been on leave 12 weeks ago because I've got a quiet week. So if I've got time, then that's what I kind of try and do. But it's really tricky. Otherwise, I can be, typing up at 11 o'clock at night, and I don't want to be doing that because I should be sleeping. Really. But if I leave it to the next day, I've kind of almost forgotten, and I'm thinking about that, and I want the next conversation to be focused just on that person and on that time. So I'm not sure I fully answered that, but there's lots of things I'm trying to bring in to try and make it a better, more of a coaching approach. But I do find I'm falling back into this performative tick box panic moment because I haven't done this, or I'm on the call and it's an apprentice that's not signed the last review and the line manager hasn't signed the last review, and I'm spending the first 10 minutes talking about that, and the coaching moment's gone because they're already in that mindset. And then if you leave it at the end, it's an afterthought, and then I end up at the next review, there's 3 signatures outstanding. It's tricky. It
does it that really affirms our approach that, you know, if you have a good background and knowledge of coaching approaches, then you can bring them in as you need them. That's really helpful. Thank you.
And actually I've just seen Catherine's put in the chat about implementing the AI to reduce the admin load, and that's working well. So I'm hopeful that our institution might pay for that extra aspect. We have set up a tracker that we can put people that are kind of often not signing and not doing things, and somebody in the office will start to chase that, but they often get quite compliance driven letters, and of course you then don't want to send too many of those because then you're damaging a relationship that you've worked really hard to build. So yeah, really, really tricky, but great question.
Thank you so much, Clementine. We have Ben as well.
Hi, Ben.
Good afternoon. Great to see this, Laura, because I contributed to one of your interviews before Christmas, and it's really lovely to see everything come full circle.
Thank you.
I have a question that perhaps comes from my more kind of managerial perspective, and I want to preface it because we've got so many ARU study coaches on the call that this is not an ARU context specific thing. It really is just more an open question about your kind of findings nationally. I think since we first met you at a UVAC a couple of years ago, and started to talk about the role of the study coach, I think we might have passed a peak of when apprenticeship growth was so rapid that a lot of universities were recruiting heavily for this sort of role. And I wonder if more recently any of your engagement with colleagues in different institutions might have revealed some more pressure with finances, with some of the changes to the funding rules around apprenticeships, and whether that's affecting recruitment into these sorts of roles as well. For me, it's gotten a little bit harder lately to get roles approved, for example, although I think we sort of have been protected a little bit because we have invested a lot in apprenticeships already. But I just wondered, what your kind of more general perspective on that across the country was.
Yeah, so that had been seen, and actually comments I presented a few other things just more recently. That's kind of coming through, but I'm finding that HEIs are diversifying a bit, so putting in for tenders for like level 3 kind of provision as well, and actually we're potentially recruiting another work-based tutor, and I wonder whether there'll be an impact on numbers. So where institutions have got lower numbers, whether they'll start to creep back up again. And I think there's an impact potentially from the level 7 change. And I've noted lots of people have said their numbers are down for the level 7 recruitment because people were just not too sure what they wanted to commit to yet. And I don't know if that's something you've experienced in terms of the level 7.
No, we are trying to sort of rapidly get some level 7 cohorts in before December to sort of get the last round through before the funding cutoff kicks in, really. I mean, it is a cutoff. I think the government wants to say it's not a cutoff because there still is eligibility for people who are at an age that you can't possibly be to do a level 7, for example. But, you know, in practice, we can't run courses with the kinds of cohort sizes that would actually mean in practice. So it is really bringing it to an end. But yeah, no, our plan at the moment, our strategy at the moment is just to try and get in some final cohorts before Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I do wonder then, as it kind of that bit peaks out, if universities aren't being strategic in what they're doing with their level 6s and tying that in and diversifying, that might have that impact. It would be maybe quite nice for numbers to dip a little bit to allow us to be able to reclaim this coaching aspect back. But yeah, we'll see.
Thank you, Ben. Daniel.
Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for your time and your insight and your knowledge. You've clearly spent a lot of time looking at things that I think that the reason I wanted to speak is that the things that you've shown us is as a study coach with a large cohort of 75. I just wanted to share that I feel reassured by the findings because you sit in your role And I think that the job that we do is obviously academic, but it's also pastoral. I'm a qualified CIAG coach, and I brought that forwards, thinking that I'd have the opportunity to really envelop that skill set. And I started with 35, and I sort of was like, okay, that's quite a lot. That's like a class. It's a class that I used to have a class of teaching.
Yeah.
And then it went to 50. And then it went to 60, and now it's to 75. And what I find is that I'm always having to be a step ahead of my systems, the way that I work and manage myself, because I want to give every single apprentice the same experience, every single progress review. That consistency is so important. And I think that perhaps, and forgive the word, the more bureaucratic the apprenticeship scheme becomes, the harder it is for me to stay enthused on behalf of the apprentices. And if they see that I'm struggling with the admin and the idea of the admin and the OTJs and the progress review forms and the minutes and everything else, then I think that they will sort of take a step back from their engagement. So I just wanted to say thanks for sharing, because it does reassure me that it is sort of national rather than in my head, because I want to give the job 100%. And it does disappoint me when I can't always have that energy that I wanted to bring to the role. So thanks for sharing. I really appreciate it.
It's really interesting. So I prep heavy, massively prep heavy, so that I am kind of ready. But we're looking at 125 again for September, and I'm just concerned that I won't be able to maintain that. And I do know from chatting to participants that so kindly gave their time that, you know, quite often it's hard to get the buy-in, especially from line managers to attend. And I think you're right. You've got to be kind of give it that 110%. Otherwise, they're not going to show up. They're not going to feel value in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thomas.
Hi, apologies not having camera on. I'm actually on annual leave at the moment, so I'm trying to juggle that.
Thank you for joining.
It was an interesting subject. I wanted to hear, obviously. Something I will, again, I missed the start due to Windows updates, unfortunately. But so you might have covered this already. Did your sort of any of your research look into not just how the study coach role was more how it was seen within the university, in the sense of, obviously universities have for a very long time been quite set in their ways with regard to, this is how we do degrees, this is, you know, the approvals, all these sort of things. Then apprenticeships came along, and suddenly this new thing. We all know that due to political situations, you know, the number of full-time students for pretty much all universities in the UK is dropping, and obviously apprenticeships is an area that is picking up, or has picked up generally. But with regard to getting that almost sales side of it, but sales internally, that promotion with regard to getting, in most cases, lecturers, you know, those sorts of people to actually buy in and see the benefits, and even just benefits for their departments with regard to, you know, them getting the funding because they've got, sorry to be more bums on seats.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So kind of chatting to various people, I did ask where the people were positioned, whether they were within a faculty, whether they weren't. And that's some of the other rich data, which I'm hoping to tie in with the next phase of my study, which will be senior leaders and course leading people that are unpicking policy and, you know, making decisions kind of around the role. I found from just myself personally, the more I've been talking about this, the more people are asking me to come in. And I was asked to come into a faculty and share some findings, and that was a faculty where it's been a real challenge up till now. So I think the more people are talking about it, you know, the better those conversations come along. But I often align apprenticeships to, like, it's the square peg in a round hole, and it's trying to kind of get that story over and the benefits to all the other people that kind of just are used to, like back in the day in FE, you know, that was a new thing, and trying to merge and integrate all of that. So I think it's a continuous journey, but I do find others that buy in. The apprentice has great experience. You know, I've had situations where course teaching teams don't know they've got apprentices in the classroom, and I just think that's a real missed opportunity, because an apprentice has so much to bring to a teaching environment. So yeah, I think it's a work in progress, but a challenge.
I 100% agree with everything. I know I'm not saying anything revolutionary new, but yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Are there any other questions for Laura before we move on to the Padlet activity?
Some great bits in the chat as well, so thank you ever so much. I'm just looking and going, yes, yeah, just absolutely, in terms of that creativity around what can be used instead of the level 7s, because people still want to have the experience and learn and develop. So I think it's about looking at how we can cater that. Thank you.
I'm also thinking, as this conversation is kind of going on, and earlier I was also talking to one of the apprenticeships workplace tutors in my institution, how many parallels we can find between the tutor research supervisor role and this one. And I feel that supervision and tutoring and traditional routes have had some time to develop and professionalize. So we have bodies like UCAT that's only 10 years old and has been working hard to professionalize the role of a tutor, to have standards for that role, but also to recognize, so to become a recognized advisor as well. So I wonder what kind of we can learn from all those roles that can be applied to workplace tutor or any other title you use for supporting apprentices, because it seems to be similar challenges with the workload, number of tutees, and wanting to support them through coaching and mentoring and spending time in relationship building, but then having no time given to that. So I think there's some things that we can learn and maybe replicate from those roles.
Yeah, brilliant.
I'm going to put a link to a Padlet in a chat. There are 3 questions that Laura wanted to ask everyone here, what their thoughts are, what they're thinking when it comes to the job title, to strategies to reduce performative effects of reviews, and changes that would need to happen in this role to really focus on, to be student-centered rather than compliance-centered. So we'll have the next 10 minutes if you engage with the Padlet, and then we'll have a conversation about that. I really like this suggestion of adding one-to-one or group meetings alongside the regular compliance meetings. I know we've talked about the number of apprentices you have and the workload, so that would add to the workload, but it seems that that would allow that focus on coaching and just building the relationship and peer support.
And then I think following from that, it would mean that the other sessions would be smoother, because you've been able to get that rapport, that relationship going, expectations ironed out. Yeah.
I was talking to a colleague this morning. So our institution, I think, recommendation is that you meet your apprentice in the first 5 weeks for half an hour. That's kind of the first meeting. But they took on themselves to actually have an hour, because they recognize that that first meeting shouldn't be about ticking the box. That is particularly important meeting to build a relationship and find out a little bit more about your learner. Or when they are on campus, to pop in and say hello to the apprentices they're supporting, to continue that relationship building. So it seems like many people are taking themselves to do extra things because they can't do it within the meeting that happens. And
I think they realise the benefit and the merits of that. I'm known as the lady with muffins, because I'll turn up at the beginning with a box of muffins. And that kind of, it isn't just about the muffins, but it just starts that, we're human. Let's kind of have a conversation. Well, Ben, what are your lighter touch reviews? Would that be okay for you to share?
Yeah, so essentially, this came out of kind of some employer kind of design. I might actually call on my colleague Katie to jump in here, actually, because she's the one where this came from, a request from an employer who was struggling with the number of apprentices, essentially, and the kind of the staffing resource that meant for them, that they wanted to sort of reduce how much time they were spending on them. So we kind of explored doing two sort of really full in-depth reviews and two that were sort of more light touch or were sort of informed by risk a little bit. So some people might still do a full review every time, and some people might sort of take a quicker approach, check in. If everything is progressing well and there's no red flags, then you probably only spend 20 minutes rather than 45 minutes. But Katie, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that one.
Yeah, just that it was interesting, initial kind of, well, we're going out to the apprentices and the employer to get some feedback on how they found it, but we actually found that a larger proportion than expected opted to have the same normal length review for their next review, even though we said that they were eligible for a condensed review. So I think from our perspective, hopefully shows that they see value in that time to reflect and that time to have those kinds of conversations and think about their progress. But yeah, definitely something that we're going to continue to explore in a planned way. So it wouldn't be ad hoc, but it would be built into some of our programs. Don't have try-3 teaching, for example. So a lighter touch or a condensed progress review. But we did work on a template to make sure that we're still compliant, because you still have to check on the actions from the last time you met on the KSB progress. And so yeah, it was reviewing our existing form and trying to pick out the parts that were absolutely essential to remain compliant.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It was interesting. I had an organisation where they had a few, and the person before me had done them all together. So 4 apprentices and line manager in the same thing. And that literally blew my mind in terms of trying to capture everything and have the conversations. And I kind of moved away from that, just because it meant that I didn't feel that people could speak as freely in that time. A group kind of classroom environment, slightly different, but I feel that this is kind of a bit more of a protected time for individuals.
I'm going to come in. I think it would be untrue if we said at university we didn't do training for people. We work really closely with the academic faculties, and we've just set up a school of apprenticeships, which is really exciting. So we've created a whole new faculty, which is being led by Ben and Katie in the room today, and they've offered the team community of practice. There's a much more accessible route to communicating with colleagues and staff internally that there was before the scheme was set up. So it's been a really good success. So yeah, we absolutely do. I think we should stand up and say that we are definitely encouraged by our new ways of working at the university. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing. Clemmy?
Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, at the OU, we're slightly different. Because we've always had practice tutors on professional programs, especially in the areas such as nursing. So that role existed kind of before the big apprenticeship boom that everyone's talking about. But following that kind of that increase in apprenticeship funding and things, there was a review on apprenticeships and how we might grow that within the OU. And as part of associate lecturer development and support, our team that look after practice tutors who support apprenticeships was set up. But we also have the apprentices do undertake kind of standard undergraduate modules and sit in those as well. So it has been a kind of on our minds, like, what would they do? How do they know that they've got those those students, and the differences between their workloads, for example, with like extending assignment submissions and things like that can become quite problematic. But yeah, for the last 3 years we've had a development piece for practice tutors, And I kind of feel like we've all, it's only just all coming together. So I hope nothing changes, but you know, with working with the faculties and, you know, our online learning provision, because everyone's distance, so our online development pieces, and kind of bringing it into the academic stroke educational development space as well. So that's how we approach it as part of our general academic development provision.
Thank you for sharing. It's really useful to see how it's being approached in different institutions. Any other questions for Laura, or anything, Laura, that you want to pick up from the Padlet?
I thought what's really interesting is caseloads is a common thing in terms of numbers. I'm not relishing back up to 125. So it's pleasing to hear when people have got lower numbers that they're able to have a coaching approach. So it gives me some hope that we'll get some change potentially. I love that somebody's put on there, my practice is to camouflage the tick boxes. I'm definitely with you there and working on that. I wonder whether my challenge is I'm not quick typing, so there is that aspect of trying to capture what's being said. I audio record my reviews as well, just in case anybody wishes to listen to my dulcet tones at a later point. So I always have that if anybody wants to check in it for that aspect. But yeah, camouflage is, I think, is, you know, a way forward. But I don't think that comes easily. I think there's some work and training around the kind of questions that could be asked to incorporate the compliance bit without people realizing. I don't think that's as natural for everyone. The last one that someone's just popped in by Attentive Piranha. I love how that it gives us names of animals as we put things in, but someone's put in, it would be interesting to feel what students thinks is an appropriate title and what kind of resonates with them. And I'm going to take that away because part of my next sample group is speaking to apprentices. So actually I'm going to add that as a question to my interview schedule. So thank you. That's really helpful.
And we can invite you, Laura, back in a year time to talk about the findings you had since today. But I'm very, very grateful for your time, for sharing. Your research is very timely, relevant, and important. So I think I won't be alone in kind of feeling grateful for you being here and sharing it with us and creating this space for discussion. And thank you everyone who attended today. I know you're rushing to other meetings and progress reviews, so thank you for prioritizing this and for giving us your time. And I will stop the event here, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact Laura or myself directly. Thank you.
Thank you.